Maybe I'll just next slide.
Whatever you want, Martin. Aye, whatever works.
All right, and
Next
I
slide,
started
please.
recording. I started recording as well.
Perfect.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm gonna give people a couple more minutes, and then we're gonna get started. In the meantime, those of you that joined us, please, by all means, let us know where you're joining from in the chat so we can say hello. Folks, I'm adding the link to the CEU form that you will need to use to begin with. I will also post it later on, but because sometimes people cannot access the chat straight away, depending on devices and so on, I'm posting it now. Click on it, have it sitting on your browser, and I'll post it again later on, okay? This is the form you will need for the keywords if you're claiming a CEU. So hello, people. Hello from Northern Ireland, Wales, Cornwall, London, Hertfordshire, Liverpool. Oh dear, all over the place. Welcome. Hello. I give people one more minute. Bradford, Hampshire, Somerset. Oh my, it's lovely turnaround. Thank you all for joining. Thank you. Okay, I'll get started. So welcome everyone. This is the monthly TISART behavioral talk that we organize. This is the last one for this academic year. Those of you who do not know me, I'm Thanos Vostanis. I'm a lecturer at the TISART Center. And at TISART, we do research to help people have a better quality of life. And we are focusing on people with intellectual and other developmental disabilities. And we offer courses in applied behavior analysis and positive behavior support, which are ABAI and UKSBA verified, approved, whatever word you want to use. And we have courses that are both campus-based and distance learning. So if any of you are interested in studying with us and you're far away, for example, in Gloucester, Dublin, Newcastle, and so on, you can still do so through our distance learning options. So our behavioral talks is our way of disseminating good practice in behavior analysis and positive behavior support to folks in the UK and, of course, all over the globe, since we're doing this online. For those of you who do not know about TISART, we also have our TISART Learning Disability Review, which is a peer-reviewed journal that always welcomes publications and submissions from folks in services. So if you have a nice case study, if you have a policy review, if you've got something you want to share with your colleagues, by all means, do so and check out TISART Learning Disability Review, which has an impact factor yet again this year, which we are really proud of and excited about. Okay, so today I'm welcoming Nadia Khan and Martin Riley, who will be talking about capable environments. Throughout the session, I will give you 3 keywords, make a note of those keywords, and at the end of the session, you will add them in that form with your details, and I will prepare a CEU or CPD certificate, and I will send that to you within 45 days. So please do not email me in 2 weeks saying, where's my certificate? I will probably be on holidays, so I will not reply to you. Okay, Nadia and Martin, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us. Could I ask you guys to share with the group what you're currently working on? And then please take it away. I'll be in the background supporting in the chat.
So hello everybody, I'm Nadia. Currently I'm a PhD candidate at the TISART Centre, and as Thanos said, it's a fantastic university, and please access the courses because you get so much support. At present, I'm looking at staff psychological wellbeing, so that's staff and intellectual disability services. And in particular, my focus is on resilience and how we understand the concept of resilience within our field.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Martin. I am the Positive Behaviour Support Lead for the National Autistic Society, Scotland, Northern Ireland. Our current kind of focus at the moment is on a reduction in restrictive practices within services. So kind of ties in with what we're going to speak about today. One of the things we've kind of found when we've done these type of programs in the past is the longevity of them and the kind of reoccurrence when things are kind of let slide and not kept on top of. And one of the things that we notice with that is, again, high uses of restrictions within services. So our current focus is again on really trying to find, I suppose, a really kind of clear audit process to identify all types of restrictions. I think we spent a lot of time in services only focusing on maybe a couple, which we'll touch on in this, in terms of physical interventions and use of as required medication, but we all know that there's so many kind of types of restrictions within everyday life for people within services, and that's our kind of big push at the moment. So that's my focus currently. And it's back to me because I'm doing the first bit.
All right.
Okay, so Nadia and I are going to talk to you today about a project we did 8 years ago now, 7-8 years ago now. Doesn't seem that long, but it was a while back. I'm going to do the first part and just give you a bit of background as to how the project came about, the pilot programme came about, the reasons behind it, and I'm going to touch on a few key areas of that project that we feel are kind of worth expanding on, particularly around about capable environments and how we use that in a variety of different ways within the project. Then we'll talk a little bit about practice leadership and periodic service reviews and how we incorporated those into the project, and give you a little bit of feedback in terms of the results we had before, during and after when we looked at the kind of data. Nadia is then going to focus on the theory basically behind why we did what we did in the second half of the presentation. So I'll just say, sorry, Nadia's controlling the slides, so I'll let Nadia flick through. So a bit of background. Initially, we worked in a large service for people with intellectual disabilities and high levels of challenging behaviours of concern within that service at that time. There was concerns raised about some of the supports and quality of life of people within the services, and Nadia and I, in terms of being part of the PBS team, were asked to come in and look at really just kind of what was happening and ways we could improve people's quality of life. So the first thing we looked at, because within the service everyone had a positive behavioural support plan, and our first kind of protocol was to really assess how efficient they were, how good they were, and where they actually being put into practice. So the first thing we did was look at an audit of all our PBS plans using the BSP Q11 format. The average of each plan came out above 80%, which showed that the plans themselves were valid, that the information in it was valid, and that the data analysis part of them was where it should be. And we had trained people in the plans previously, but it had been just classroom-based training with no follow-ups. So what we'd kind of seen over the months before the project was major concerns within the service around about low quality of life within the service, so low levels of engagement, participation, community participation for people within the services. We saw high levels of behaviours of concern, challenging behaviour. We also saw high recorded levels of people being administered as required medication, and there was observations and reports of environmental restrictions within the service. So prior to beginning any programme, what we first had to kind of ascertain from a kind of data analysis point of view was exactly where people were at in those areas. So in the likes of people's quality of life, in terms of the challenging behaviour, in terms of the community participation, what level was each individual sitting at. So there's a range of assessments that you'll see there that we undertook for every individual within that service. We did a number of these assessments over a period of time so that the data that we were collecting was robust enough to be valid in terms of taking forward any kind of new work. So the main kind of ones in terms of what we're going to look at today in terms of active support measure and momentary time sampling for focus on people's quality of life. So what were people actually doing day to day? How were they being supported? What were they, what activities were they engaging in? Were they learning any new skills? Was there, the levels of interaction, were they high, were they low? So that was to kind of really understand exactly what that kind of looked like in terms of people's quality of life. When we did these assessments, what we did find was the percentages of engagement, participation, and interaction were very low. So there wasn't a lot happening in terms of good support and good outcomes for people within the service at that time. And it also showed up, extremely high levels of disengagement for some people within the service as well. So once we had collected all that data, we kind of met to decide how we were going to kind of take things forward. So we'd seen the traditional route of, doing a functional analysis, writing a behaviour support plan, giving that over to the service hadn't been effective. And we'd seen, obviously, not only had it not been effective, but we'd seen a decline in people's quality of life over a period of time. So we kind of needed to focus on another way of improving people's quality of life within the service, that other than the traditional way we'd always kind of done it. So one of the things we did look at was that kind of active support element, that kind of engagement from support staff on a day-to-day basis in terms of improving people's quality of life, and also giving people meaning and purpose in their day, giving people things to do that they enjoyed, that they liked, and that they could progress with. We also realised, as I said earlier, that we had done training in the past, but it tended to be just classroom-based training. So you would do a training day with a team, you would go through a plan or a guideline or a specific bit of work, and then you would kind of hand it over. And then we would kind of go back to what we did, and the service would go back to what they did. And what we realised then for that point was that there was a bit missing. There was no co-production, there was no partnership working, there was things falling through the gaps because no one knew exactly who should be looking at what and who should be doing what and how things should be evaluated or escalated or moved on from there. So one of the other elements that I'm going to focus on at this part is that kind of practice leadership element and how we got people within the service involved in their own service in terms of supporting individuals. In the service we worked in at that point in time, we decided that the people who'd been most effective in those roles would have been the team leaders and the senior support workers within the service. Those were the most front-facing managers at that time in terms of being there day-to-day in people's houses, in people's flats, linking in with staff, seeing what was going on. So they had the practical ability to actually make those changes. But what they didn't have was any way of doing that. They didn't have any training, they didn't have any support, they didn't have any knowledge of how they could take these things forward. So we developed basically a kind of mix of hands-on and classroom based training with the team leaders and senior support workers in order to move this kind of project forward. So what I'm going to focus on for the next couple of slides is capable environments. Again, forgive me if some of you already know what that is. I'll just give you a brief kind of introduction to that if you don't. So capable environments, a systematic, theoretically driven approach, focusing on quality of life and a quality of support design for people with an intellectual disability. The key points when we looked at capable environments were that they produce positive outcomes for individuals, such as enhanced quality of life, and as a co-occurring effect, it may decrease instances of challenging behaviour. And that was the two areas within our service, obviously, that were the major concerns after we had done our initial baseline data, was that poor quality of life and high levels of behaviours of concern. So again, the 12 characteristics, as you can see on the screen there, very much focused on quality of life, and what we found as well was the evidence base that went with each characteristic was really robust. So again, if these areas were put into practice the way that they're meant to be and the plans were detailed enough and were relevant to that person, you should see changes in people's quality of life because people are having all of these characteristics implemented into their daily lives. So the opportunity to have positive social interactions, the opportunity to make choices for themselves. the opportunity to learn new skills, looking at people's health and healthcare and support, the opportunity to have links with family and friends, all those kind of day-to-day things that we're missing within the service, things that people didn't really, I suppose, realise the importance of. And as I say, when we looked through all the kind of research before we were doing that, like, you know, the people environment stuff Peter McGill did really kind of like hit home with us in terms of, on the face of it, how obvious it is, but when you actually looked within services, how little it was actually happening. And I think that was the thing, like people just didn't realise the importance of these areas. So now if you just want to go next slide. So once we had the capable environments framework as our first kind of protocol in terms of this is what we're going to use as a starting point to build up people's quality of life, we kind of looked at it and thought, before we put anything new in place in terms of a capable environments plan for each person, we kind of had to find out where each person was in terms of their current support within that framework. So rather than just going ahead and rewriting things that might not be effective, or actually, do we know if this person likes this or doesn't like this, or if there's things that's already in place that are working or not working, we decided that we needed to appraise current support. So this is where we can use that capable environments framework in a slightly different way. And before we did anything else, we can appraise support based on that. So if you just flip to the next slide, Nadia, I'll give you an example of that. So for each characteristic, we had what the characteristic was, what it involved, and why it was important. And that was already stuff that Miguel had identified in his work. What we added in was what was working well currently for that person and what were opportunities for development. So for each, as I say, for each individual and for every characteristic, we did observations within the service and we looked at, right, these are things that are working well currently. That's great. That's things we can continue to incorporate. These are the gaps, or these are the opportunities that we could see that we could potentially put in place moving forward for people, or things that people weren't currently doing. So in this example here, in terms of meaningful for support for engagement, meaningful activity, there was some things that were working well. Oh, sorry, now you can just get back to slide, sorry. So in terms of was some participation in terms of the key things that Sandra liked. However, they weren't happening frequently enough. There was also things that she did like to do, that she had the opportunity to do, but they weren't. She wasn't given the chance to go and do these things for herself. She was like things like musicals, horse racing, football, things like that. But these were very much about, oh, we can watch that TV, we can do this. There was nothing around about actually could there be an engagement in that process for her. So again, this would vary from person to person, depending on, you know, what good support in this characteristic looks like. But it was a really good way of finding that information out firsthand before changing anything. We found it really useful because I think, even from our point of view, there was that assumption that things were happening in these areas and they actually weren't. And I think that's, again, when we talk about the practical leadership stuff, that's where things fell through the gaps, because you're assuming, right, that must be happening because a team leader will pick that up, or a senior will pick that up, and they're maybe assuming, well, actually, no, maybe the PBS team will pick that up and they'll put that in place, and nothing was actually happening. So it's a really good way of just identifying currently where your support sits in terms of capable environments for people within services. So once we had, sorry, Nadia. So once we had that appraisal, what we then did was we, through our project, we sat with the practice leaders and we developed new plans for each individual based on the 10 support characteristics. So support for participation in meaningful activity and what that looks like, what you should be doing or what you should be seeing day to day in terms of that support for that person. So these are the things that whenever you're getting in, or you know, if you're a support worker or you're a manager overseeing that support, if you were getting into a service or to someone's flat and you are looking at what good support for participation in meaningful activity looks like, this is what you should see. These are the things that people should be doing on an everyday basis. So a plan was created for every individual based on the 10 characteristics, and it was broken down into what that looks like. Now, when we initially put this in place, because as I said earlier, we were so aware that things weren't happening that we assumed were happening, we needed a way to basically review and evaluate how these plans were working, and what needed to be changed moving forward. So we developed a periodic service review based on the capable environments template. The key thing with this, and I see Nadia is going to get into the kind of theory behind the PSRs in far more detail later. The key thing we wanted to do was have that buy-in and make sure it was co-produced, and we weren't having either ourselves or the practice leaders deciding what staff should see or vice versa. It was a collaborative approach to make sure everyone understood the importance of why we need to review these things, but also to make sure that everyone bought into it and everyone was working towards the same goal. Because again, what you tend to find sometimes, especially in bigger services, is that there's that fragmented support. So a support staff member will look at support in one way, managers will look at it another way, behaviour support or whoever will look at it in a slightly different way, and all that leads up to is that inconsistency and that lack of the lack of development for the person themselves and the lack of big positive outcomes for that person. So in terms of the PSR, once we had identified the capable environment standards for each component, we linked a PSR to that. And again, we kept it really simple in terms of what the desired performance was, when it was meant to happen, who was going to oversee it, and how it was going to be observed. So this was, again, there was 10 of these for every person based on the capable environments framework, and it was really simple as this. So initially, in terms of choice, Sandra's put in a choice of clothes to wear, after a shower, and a choice of meals at meal times. When should this happen on a daily basis? Who should be doing this? A support worker, and who should be observing it? Team leaders, senior support workers to observe that in practice at those times through a direct observation. Once they had observed that in whatever way that was meant to be done, the PSR was then scored. So either one, that it was completed, or an O, which was an opportunity for development, for further progress. And we were very conscious of making an opportunity to development and not that the person hadn't achieved something. Because again, we knew this was a process. This wasn't going to happen overnight where you were going to get 100% change or 100%, every single time you scored a PSR. But what we wanted, again, in terms of that collaborative approach, was to make the support staff aware that this wasn't people checking up on you. This wasn't people that if you did something or you couldn't get the person you were supporting to do something, that you were going to get criticised for that, or you were going to get, into trouble or whatever. Because I think, again, going back to when we first looked at putting this project into place, we kind of had that culture where staff didn't feel supported and they felt like if they made a mistake, they weren't getting the help, they were just getting criticised for not being able to get somebody to do something. And again, when we think about practice leadership, the whole ethos of that is to support people along the way. It's not to go in and check up on people, it's not to go in and criticise, it's to give people the opportunity to be coached, to be mentored, to have the opportunity to discuss how to move things forward. And we wanted to make the PSR fit that framework as well. So yes, it might not have been like a successful, maybe and at one point it wasn't, they weren't able to get Sandra the opportunity to go through that process. But it was again about, right, okay, so what can we do the next time to make that easier for you to do? So what's the opportunities we can take from this? What's the learning we can take from this in order to move this forward?
Could I just jump in to deliver the first keyword there, guys? Okay, folks, if you're claiming a CU, the first keyword is choice. The first keyword is choice, as in the slide where it says provision of opportunities for choice. The keyword is choice. Thank you.
And as I just touched on there, so we had a lot of, like, the PSR in place, we had capable environments in place, we had active support measures in place. We had an awful lot going on in terms of what we wanted to put in place within the service. But again, the thing that was missing throughout was that practice leadership role previous to doing this bit of work. And that was the kind of key to this, was getting people into the habit of being practice leaders rather than just managers. Understanding that actually your role is so powerful in terms of the culture of a service and how you can implement change and how you can implement good practice and how you can improve people's quality of life just by being present and giving that supportive that support to people if they're struggling or if they're having a bad day, but also having the skills to understand how you move things forward as well. So that's what the workshops were based on, was to train practice leaders in, how to conduct a really simple functional assessment, or how to conduct a really simple PSR, what a capable environments plan was and why it was important, so that they could then impart that knowledge onto their staff team as well. So it wasn't just that, or the behaviour support team will tell you about this, or this is what I've been told to tell you to do, so therefore you need to do it. It was having, again, the knowledge of what it was and being able to give that to staff was such an important thing, because it built more positive relationships between staff teams and managers, because it wasn't then a case of us and them. It wasn't then a case of, well, we do all this and we have to figure out how to move things forward and we don't get any help, and then you come in and tell us that we're not doing what we should be doing. You had that co-production at that point. So those sessions were the kind of, I suppose, what held the whole project together in terms of moving on to the next step, was being able to have people come to the sessions, get the information, either whether it's, as I say, capable environments, active support, PSRs, whatever, talk through it, discuss how that's going to look, and then being able to go back into services and work with staff and work with support staff on the floor, and be able to move things forward for individuals. So as I say, there was 8, but I've only kind of touched on the kind of 3 key things that we did. We did 8 sessions all in, and a couple of other different things. We looked at functional analysis, we looked at resolution strategies, we looked at a couple of other different things as well, which obviously Nad will touch on in a wee bit. But as I say, I think regardless of what it was we were going to do, if we didn't have that practice leadership element, I don't think it would have been as successful as what it was. So, which kind of takes me on just to the kind of some of the results. So just to give you a kind of an understanding of how things moved forward throughout the project. So as I said at the start, one of the big things we saw within the service was a high use of PRN medication for individuals. And as you can see there at baseline, for this individual, there was a high use of behavioural PRN medication in place. And as we did probes throughout the sessions then after the training project, you saw quite a significant decrease in that. And I think one of the reasons for that was because people had other tools to use, for want of a better phrase. You know what I mean? They actually had options in terms of, oh, well, we could do this today, or we could do that today, or maybe we could try teaching this skill, and maybe we could get out in the community and we could do this. I think previous to that, not having that, it became like a default. As soon as there was a potential that someone may have a bad day or be upset or whatever, then they didn't have anything in order to manage that. So it became, well, this is what we need to do, keep people safe and to keep ourselves safe. And when you gave people options, especially more positive, proactive options, you saw a massive decrease in PRN administration. So that was obviously a really significant one for us. And then the other ones were again about raising people's quality of life. So the active support measure. So when we did that during the data analysis before we started the project, what we found was that there wasn't a lot of active support going on, that things were done for people, that people were left, like basically, I'll do this for you, you just sit there just now, that's fine. There wasn't a lot of skill teaching. Once we had put that in place, again, we saw quite a significant increase in that. And it wasn't, when obviously you see an increase there, like a lot of the things we're talking about, it wasn't like, huge big changes to support. It was more just, somebody was enjoying a cup of tea in the morning rather than that person, support staff, making it for them. They were being encouraged to come in and, be part of that process. Just really simple things. In terms of just being, present in your own life and present in your own, decision making in terms of what you want to do. We weren't talking about huge, big, like going from nothing to everything. It was just little simple kind of tweaks. But what again you saw was confidence of staff improving, because it was like, oh well, I feel more confident that I can ask somebody to do this, and therefore then I can maybe expand to this, and I can, I can move on to maybe making a meal, or maybe going out to a restaurant or something. People are starting to think about different things they could do. It was just giving people that framework to work within. So we saw an improvement in active support, and the last couple was really big improvements in people's engagement. So in this slide here, you look at, obviously in the red part of the pie chart, that was how disengaged people were within an hour of their day. So more than half of that hour, that person was sat disengaged, and that was a recurring theme that we saw when we did the MTS across the whole service, was huge levels of just disengagement and very, very low levels of meaningful participation, meaningful interaction, positive social interactions, doing things, that the person enjoyed, being involved in everyday parts of their life. And as we work through the project, what you see is obviously a change in that. So, less time disengaged, more time spent engaged in different parts of their day, interaction improving, people, again, leisure improving, so people getting to do things they want to do. And then in the kind of last slide that I'm just going to talk about was a change in staff actions as well. And again, that was another thing that was really positive to see. And I think when you see those, not having obviously the full context of exactly what we did, it maybe just looks like staff couldn't be bothered and didn't want to do things. I think a lot of the time we didn't really think that was the case. I think people just didn't know what they were meant to do or how they were meant to do it. And I think we found that quite a lot, was it wasn't because people were thinking, I can't be bothered doing this today, or I just don't see the point in to do it. I think people genuinely didn't know, and I think that was the way of coping, was to disengage with support, because they didn't know if people responded to them in a negative way, or they became upset, how do I manage this, or I don't actually know what to offer the person, so therefore it's better not offering anything in case what offer isn't what the person wants. So there was a lot of elements that contributed to that disengagement levels from staff. But what again we saw as we went through the project was more engagement for staff, more purpose in what they were doing, more meaningful activity, again engagement. So when they were working with people, it was about with a purpose for that day. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to move on to that, and then after that we're going to go here. So there was more of a routine, more of a structure built into that, and again you actually saw more engagement at that point as well. So now that probably went over a wee bit. Yeah.
That's all right. Oh, that's okay, Martin. So Martin's given you an introduction to Capable Environments programme, and I'll now identify some of the critical components of our programme and discuss these in relation to theory. So we won't discuss every element, as we don't have time to do that, but I'll pull on some of the key theories that underpin our work. So one of the critical theories that underpins our work and at the heart of Capable Environments is motivating operations. So we need to ask ourselves why the Capable Environments framework makes such a significant impact on both quality of life and behaviours that challenge. And to answer that question, we must understand the theory behind it. So I'll do a short recap of what motivating operations are, and then discuss these in relation to our work. So some of you might be aware that motivating operations are environmental variables that have two effects. They have a value altering effect and a behaviour altering effect. So the value altering effect is either increasing or decreasing the reinforcing or punishing effectiveness of a stimuli, object or event. And then the behaviour altering effect is that it either increases or decreases the current frequency of all the behaviours that have been reinforced or punished by that stimulus, object or event. So motivating operations can have two effects. One, they can be establishing operations, or two, they can be abolishing operations. So establishing operations has a value altering effect by increasing the current effectiveness of the stimulus, object or event as a reinforcer. So it makes it more, it makes the item event more reinforcing. And then due to that, it alters the behaviour. So it increases the current frequency of that behaviour that has been reinforced by that stimulus. So it has an evocative effect. But it can also have an abolition effect or abolition operation. And that has a decrease in the current effectiveness of the reinforcing or the reinforcingness of the object, event, etc., and then decreases the current frequency of the behaviours that have previously been reinforced by that stimulus. So it has an abative effect. So let's keep in mind our understanding of MOs and what I just described when we think about the environments that individuals with intellectual disabilities live within. Services and supports designed for people with intellectual disabilities have some common features that increase the likelihood of behaviours that challenge. These common features are that these environments don't always meet the person's personal or sensory needs. Communication isn't tailored to what the person's preferences are or what they require, which leads to confusion. Tasks or activities that the person doesn't enjoy are at times made mandatory. There's an expectation to engage in them. These environments can result in lack of interaction, really low staffing levels or low ratios of staffing levels to people we support, expectations of tasks to be completed, over building relationships and engaging in meaningful activities, and others being unsure or unwilling to interact, as Martin had kind of picked up on within our initial sort of review of what was going on. These environments can lack varied activities, interactions or feedback, and access to preferred items at times can be restricted, locked away, even if those are sometimes locked away for the person's safety or due to theft, but those are common things. And as Emerson said, it's common for people with intellectual disabilities to have communication support needs. So it's understandable in situations like this and environments that are described as I have described them, that challenging behaviour may be likely or more increased likely to happen in a way of a person communicating their needs or an indicator of their unmet needs. Now we know, and it has been shown time and time again, behaviours that challenge are more likely to occur in disorganised environments, those that fail to promote quality of life outcomes, and those that are unresponsive to personal needs. Therefore, addressing those environmental deficits may ensure environments are more capable. Environments are more capable would be a rational foundation for support design, irrespective of the presence of behaviours described as challenging. And more importantly, ensuring our attention is focused on environmental strategies that smooth the fit between the person and their environment. So there are many ways that people's environments and lack of opportunities to exercise choice and control can impact on how people may behave. But in general, there are some broad categories that may help us point us in the right direction for understanding why behaviours that challenge occur. So traditionally, it's been acknowledged that there are 4 broad categories of why people engage in behaviours of concern. Escape, or to avoid difficult situations, to indicate a need or access to social attention or interaction, to meet a sensory need that helps them in some way, and to gain access to tangible items that they want or require. So it may be that services in themselves work as establishing operations, or some might say setting events, for behaviours that challenge. In other words, environments that are developed to support individuals with an intellectual disability instead may provide an environment that increases the likelihood of challenging behaviour. So let's look at this in a bit more detail and consider, let's start by considering the function of attention or social interaction. So in environments that lack interaction from others, have low staffing levels, there's expectations for tasks to be completed, over building relationships and engaging in meaningful activities, or others feel unsure or unwilling to interact, we create an environment where there's a deprivation of interaction. And that deprivation, that establishing operation, alters the value of interactions. So it increases the reinforcing effect of interactions from others. And similarly, it then affects it has a behaviour altering, evocative effect, and it increases the frequency of the behaviours that result in access to that type of interaction. So for example, If an individual is deprived of a lot of interaction, low levels of staff, the desire to have access, that the reinforcing effect of that interaction is increased, they may engage in behaviours that have previously gained them access to interaction. So those might be, you know, very residential type language here, but flooding, you know, because people come rushing in, shouting because people respond, anything that draws people into a situation, whether that's socially appropriate or not, it has the impact it's expected to have. So let's consider the escape or avoidance situations example. So people might seek to escape or avoid distressing situations, and this may be due to environments not meeting people's personal or sensory needs, communication not being tailored to the person, so they're confused and want away from it, and tasks and activities that the person doesn't enjoy are mandatory, and there's an expectation to do things that don't meet that person's preferences. So in that situation, there's an increase in aversive environments or situations, and it has the effect, the establishing operation of increasing the reinforcing effect of escaping that environment, therefore increases the behaviours that gain access to removal of those distressing situations. So for instance, imagine being in a service where possibly tasks, demands are placed on the person isn't able to do them or doesn't want to at that point, and the individual engages in a behaviour of concern, spitting, for instance. What happens is people then either remove the person or ask the person to leave or ban them from situations. So it provides escape and avoidance of those situations. Similarly, for I won't go through in detail for every single one, but for, you know, automatic and sensory reinforcement, if environments don't have access to stimulation, feedback, interaction, then they're in a state of deprivation of stimulation. They want, you know, it's more reinforcing to get access to that, so they will likely engage in behaviours that gain access to that, or there's an increased frequency in engagement of behaviours that gain access to that. And that's also the same for tangible. In many sort of support services for people with intellectual disabilities, things are locked away. Now, there may be justified reasons for that, of course, but that will create an environment in which accessing those preferred items is more reinforcing, and behaviours that have previously gained access to those. One of the common ones we talk about, and some of you might know this from experience, is individuals who are on diets, specific diets, can't have fizzy juice, something like that. But then members of staff come into services with cans of Coke or, you know, bottles of juice, whatever it is. And the individual engage in behaviours of concern to gain access to those, pushing the person or, you know, pulling at cupboards where they know things are locked and possibly leading to property destruction. But if we understand the environment as an establishing operation, we can very much see why that is the case.
Nadia, can I just jump in
Please.
for the second keyword? Guys, the second keyword is environment. The second keyword is environment. I repeat, the second keyword for your CEU is environment, as you see it on the slide. Thank you.
So capable environments address these establishing operations by providing access to critical areas that have been identified as increasing behaviours of concern, if not adequately supported within the lives of people with intellectual disabilities. Martin's went through these and we've shown you this visual, but things like positively interacting with others, communication that meets the person's individual needs and preferences, ensuring engagement in activities that is meaningful to the person. That's just a few, but capable environments helps us to understand establishing operations and how we can address those establishing operations within our practice. So the second theory we're going to discuss and that underpins our work is organisational behaviour management. So OBM is a subdiscipline of ABA, which is an application of behaviour analytic principles and contingency management techniques to change behaviour in organisational settings, and OBM supported through the PSR, our pilot programme. So we utilised the Periodic Service Review, or PSR, within our work. And in the next few slides, I'll explain. First, Martin's given you a brief overview of them, so I won't go into great detail, but just slightly discuss what PSRs are, and then how OBM influenced the developments of PSRs. So the Periodic Service Review was developed by Lavinia in 1994 as a self-reporting process that supports quality assurance. And it's essential to understand that this is not an audit or an inspection tool, which Martin made really clear. It's an appraisal with a focus on engaging in continuous quality improvement. And the drivers that influence the development of PSRs originated from the field of OBM, in which there is a strong emphasis that all organisation members have a shared role in generating ideas and solutions. Creating a culture of creative thinking leads to increased staff autonomy by developing a shared vision with the team. And this ties in with recent research that's research developments which emphasise that leadership is no longer viewed as something done to employees by somebody appointed as a leader, but rather as a dynamic social process and a collective activity generated by the collaborative interactions of colleagues and other stakeholders working towards a shared vision and goal. There's just some notes about PSRs. I'm not going to go into those because actually Martin captured this quite well. But within our work, participants were supported to develop PSR standards for their focus person, based on the 10 capable environments, as Martin said. And the PSR focused on how to observe and identify whether a standard had been achieved. And then the participants were supported to complete these PSRs weekly, with a focus on permanent products and/or observations being completed. They were encouraged to display graphic feedback, showing changes, achievements, and further opportunities within offices that staff would use frequently. And in the development of the PSR was all done with the team. So the idea, we've not really touched on it too much, and no, I'm going to move on from this, apologies. So performance management is a key element of organisational behaviour management, and it places a focus on understanding the antecedents and consequences of behaviours within an organisation, and really making changes to variables to increase productive behaviours and decrease of increase in productive behaviours, decrease in unproductive behaviours through manipulating variables. Pinpoints are a critical element of OBM and performance management and support the development of PSRs. So pinpoints consider both results and behaviour. So behaviour, anything a living organism can do, and then the results, what's left behind, the permanent product. But pinpoints very much focus on targeting behaviour, as targeting results can have unpredictable outcomes. And if we think about creating standards within a periodic service review, the knowledge about how to do that stems from pinpoints, because there's a focus on behaviour. So when Martin spoke about opportunities for choice, it very much focused on what we wanted to see staff doing, not the outcome of quality of life. Yes, we're hoping for quality of life outcomes, but if we focused on quality of life, we might see unpredictable results. Whereas if we focus on behaviour, we know what's expected to be seen. And again, pinpoints focus on increasing appropriate behaviour, and similarly within the PSR, we very much focus on things we want to increase, not things that we want to decrease and see less of. Within pinpoints, it's about identifying the biggest opportunity, selecting a few behaviours that have the greatest impact, and then not overwhelming. And similarly with the periodic service review and our approach with the 10 capable environments, we very much focused on 10 key things. We didn't want to overwhelm them at all. It was simple things that they could do every day that enhanced quality of life. Again, pinpoints are observable, measurable, and reliable. And when we think of standards within a periodic service review, we ensure they very clearly detail what's expected to be seen. We detail how those will be measured, and that supports the reliability, because it's very clear what we want to see, when it's expected to happen, who's expected to observe it, and what we're likely to see. And it ensures, again, with pinpoints, there's a focus on frontline staff being involved. And as Martin's already said, as I've described, within the development of our periodic service review using the Capable Environments framework, staff were a critical co-producer of that. Monitoring data is essential. Making decisions based on that data is critical. And again, within our PSR, we ensured that the managers were displaying visual graphs throughout their service. So it's really important that we took that key understanding from pinpoints. Self-monitoring, as we said, this was not something that was placed on managers by us. We supported them to develop it, but it was a self-monitoring tool, and that's why it was so effective. Staff were aware of the process, and again, that visual display was critical. We ensured that was happening across the services that we were working in. I see that we've got 10 minutes. Thanos, would you rather we did questions now? Or would you like us to continue?
Up to you. I can be guided by you. Usually we leave 5 minutes for questions. Would you like to have 5 more minutes to finish your points? Would that help?
I'll go through a couple of the slides very quickly. I think just to give you an idea of what we did. So,
no problem.
So I'll discuss a little bit about functional assessment. So within our work, the multi-elemental behaviour support model was a key consideration. And we used the model to train frontline managers to assess the function of behaviours that challenged and then implement and evaluate MEBS plans. For each frontline manager, they had selected a focus person to work with to go through the pilot programme. So in line with the Capable Environments framework, this was sufficient for many of them, but for some individuals, it didn't provide the support required to increase quality of life and decrease behaviours of concern. And we identified that they may need to conduct a functional assessment and implement more detailed MEBS plans. So we worked alongside the manager, and we, as Martin said, practice leadership was a key element of the pilot programme. So in conducting functional assessments, the practice leaders were supported by us. So we practice led on how to do this work, and then they practice led within their services. So there was a staged approach to the coaching and mentoring to ensure they had the support they needed to do something that's quite complex. And a lot, the research behind teaching staff to conduct functional assessments and implement MEBS was essential within the development of our programme. So studies have shown that staff can be trained to conduct functional assessments and develop MEBS plans through a training process called person-focused training. And in fact, McLean in 2005 makes the argument for training staff for two key reasons. There are a limited number of behavioural specialists and psychologists who can provide this vital support to individuals and their teams, leaving many without essential provision. And there's better contextual fit, the fit between behaviour plans and the factors that affect implementation in a setting. So the higher the chance the plans will be implemented and maintained over time. So staff who work with the person have a better understanding of the person and are more acutely aware of the environmental and organisational factors that hinder or enhance the implementation and maintenance of MEBS plans. So they're in the best position to make these decisions. There's vast research showing the impact of using person-focused training and skilling practice leaders in this work. So I've added some of that there. We'll share our slides. I saw the comment earlier. We will share our slides, so you'll be able to access some of that information. But some of the vital elements of PFT are that it's classroom-based. So it's an important part of the programme and allows sharing of knowledge and theory between the trainer and participants. But critical to this is the application of evidence-based theory and turning it into practical skills within the use of in-service coaching and mentoring. And Martin and I were key in providing that coaching and mentoring. So after more formal learning takes place, the trainer or someone in a specialist leadership role spends time with the times with the participant to practice the skills taught, and feedback is provided to apply these new skills. So we've tried to provide an overview of our work, but we're unable to discuss all of this in an hour, and Martin and I were very conscious of that when we started, and so we've been able to pull key bits that we thought were important to discuss. But if you're interested in the programme, you can access our article, which is by the Tizard Learning Disability Review, and you can access our book here or through the scanner here. Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry. All right, thank you for this, guys, and thank you for highlighting the book as well. I'm sure folks will be interested in reading it and learning more about it. So I've got a few questions, and folks, please do send more questions in the chat. So the first question says, did you deliver formal active support training? I think that question is probably for you, Martin. I think it came through when you were discussing your work.
Yeah, so we kind of we used the Beadle Brown framework when we looked at active support, and we, again, the 4 key components of that. So little and often, and the rest of them escape me at this moment in time. But what we did was we used those 4 components, and very similar to the capable environment framework, we made a plan from that. So we had access to Beadle Brown's training pack, which we used parts of that. We didn't use the full pack with that because obviously we combined core elements of that along with capable environments into the project that we felt were necessary for the work we were doing. But from that, we created an active support plan for each individual, very similar to the capable environments one we did.
Great. Thank you, Martin. The next question says, in terms of the engagement pie charts, what was the time difference from one to the other?
So we did, in terms of the probes throughout the pilot programme. Is that what the question means? Sorry about? Yeah. So we did, how many did we do all in? We did 6, I think, Nadia?
6.
Throughout the programme. Yeah. So obviously we had the baseline data, and then the programme, so there was 8 sessions over the course of 16 weeks, every 2 weeks, wasn't it? And we had 6 probes throughout that. It would be every, I can't do the maths on that quickly, every few weeks, every couple of weeks, we did probes.
And am I right in saying, Martin, the ones that you showed were baseline and then after the programme had finalised?
I didn't include all 6 of them. That was the kind of the first and the last kind of probes there. But we did ones, and the reason we did that again throughout was not just doing like, let's just do one at the start and one at the end, was because, again, similar to when we're talking about like implementing the PSR and looking at how that was improving week on week, we wanted to ensure that the measures that we took beforehand, we were keeping a track of those rather than having a big gap, because I think what we'd seen previously was when we do data analysis, sometimes we do that initial baseline data and then you do something and then you measure afterwards, but it depends how long that gap is. You could miss a lot within that time period. I think we felt that doing it every couple of weeks just gave us far better, far more reliable kind of indications of how things were going. We weren't seeing obviously huge differences in that, a couple of week period, but it let us know that we were, what kind of track we were on. I think that was something we can advocated throughout. That was just maybe having those extra data probes was worthwhile, rather than thinking, let's just do the programme and hope that people have taken on board what we've said, and then we'll do a probe at the end, and then we realise, no, actually, they haven't. So it was every couple of weeks did them.
Okay, thanks, guys. Another question says about the pinpoints. Were operational definitions used within those, so there's a common language for people?
Yes. So with regards to pinpoints, that's where the standards within PSRs are derived. So there's clear things within the standards. So Martin had shown you a sort of table with 3 W's and a H, I think it was. So it was what's expected to be seen, when is it expected to happen, who's responsible for it, and then how will it be measured. So it was very operationally defined using the PSR sort of system. So it didn't matter, you know, I sort of touched on that with pinpoints, the expectation for reliability. It was very clear, no matter who looked at that Capable Environments periodic service review, what they were expecting to see that identified whether it had happened or not. Absolutely.
Got another question, but let me deliver the last keyword before I do so, because I appreciate that some folks might need to go. So the last keyword for your CAU is standards. The last keyword for your CAUs is standards, and I'm putting the CAU form in the chat, folks. So click on this, let it sit in your browser, because when we conclude the session, you won't have access to the chat. So just make sure you click on the link. You add the 3 keywords in your details, and I will prepare the certificate for you. And as I said, give me 45 days and I will send them over along with a copy of the slides. Another question says, was there any indirect effect on staff turnover / job satisfaction?
We didn't measure staff turnover, so I wouldn't be able to tell you for definite. I mean, staff skills increased, but that's not to say that they definitely did or didn't stay. But I think that's an interesting thing to consider, and it's possibly something. Oh, sorry, Martin.
I'm just going to say that was actually, I remember having this conversation a while ago. That was one of the things I think that, in hindsight, you know, we realised that we probably missed was actually measuring that properly. I think anecdotally, what we saw during the period we were doing that was, I think people appreciated being more involved in the supports, as Nadia touched on earlier. Like, that co-production was so important to actually, for us, obviously, to get, you know, proper information in terms of what was happening, rather than just assuming these things on behalf of others. But also, I think it felt to the people who were in the services at those times delivering support that they were being listened to, that they had a voice, that they had opportunities to take things forward, which they probably hadn't had before. I would say anecdotally, it probably did, and I think after a while, when obviously the kind of the legacy of the programme kind of fell away, you'd started to see that dissatisfaction probably creeping back in again, because things were going back to, I suppose, the kind of old ways, and a crude way to put it. But I think that's one of the things in hindsight I wish we'd probably done, was actually properly measure that. But it didn't. So.
Got a comment. Recruitment and retention is certainly an interesting aspect. Capable environments are supposed to help people feel that they have a voice. I've got a question that says, were you able to transfer the skills and provision to the wider stakeholders? For example, parents, staff at daycare, provision, etc.
So again, it wasn't something that we looked at, but I think that would be really interesting. And I think what we did was, you know, we started out, this was our pilot programme. I think there's more to be done, and I think there's more being done with capable environments. I know at the UK SBA conference, there's a presentation looking at sort of adapting culture and modifying cultures within organisations. So I think this was a starting point, but absolutely, I think there could be ways of you know, generalising those skills across other environments that the person accesses. Absolutely.
Okay, will this presentation be available on the TISARD YouTube channel? Yes, we always upload them, but we cannot offer CEUs for watching the recordings. You only get CEUs if you're attending synchronously, as you are right now. I've got another question. What length of time did you gather EMACAR data for?
Say that again, Thanos.
For the EMACAR, the assessment tool that you guys used, what length of time did you gather data for?
That would be the active support measure. So that was an hour for each time that we used the active support measure as a minimum. So sometimes we were there longer, but yes, it was an hour that we were in the environment before completing the tool.
We did that for six separate occasions for each individual.
Yep.
All right. I'm sure you've seen how many thank yous have come through. So clearly people were satisfied, and I'm glad to hear so. Thank you all for attending. We will be in touch again probably in October to start our next round of behavioral talks with the new academic year. Thank you for keeping us company, for those of you that have attended previous sessions, and hopefully those of you that might have attended for the first time, you will be interested in coming back. Thank you to Nadia, thank you to Martin for a wonderful presentation, and take care everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.